Okay, well, good morning, everybody, or in some cases, good afternoon, or even good evening. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Chris Selland. I lead marketing here at Akumina. You are going to hear very little from me today. I am mainly here just to introduce our primary speakers, and even though the screen says Sean McDonough and Sean McDonough, it's actually Sean McDonough and Troy Trudel. Troy is our lead evangelist. Sean is our SharePoint MVP and plays a lot of other roles, and I'll let them introduce themselves beyond that. But they are going to be the primary speakers today. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I also know some people may be watching this on replay. We realize it's the middle of the summer, which is, or I guess late summer, which isn't the ideal time for a webinar. A lot of people are on vacation. So if you're watching this on a delayed feed, obviously you won't be able to participate in the Q&A, but we thank you for being here as well. And we hope everybody is having or had a great summer. So the only other role I am going to play is I will moderate the Q&A and chat. So if you have questions, please do put them in there. We will leave some time at the end. We're going to try to wrap up promptly in an hour. So these guys will talk for about 45-ish minutes, maybe a little bit less, and then we will do the Q&A at the end. So if you have anything, please feel free to chat in or ask in the Q&A. I guess you have tabs for both. And without further ado, let me turn things over to Troy and to Sean.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
So I am Troy Trudel. As Chris mentioned, I am the product evangelist over here at Akumina. So I'll be covering topics around how Akumina and SharePoint Online work together. And Sean, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Sean McDonough. I've been working with Akumina in various capacities for probably 7 years now. But I've been an employee for the last 2 or 3 years. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I work primarily with SharePoint and have since 2004. I'm here to basically give you guys kind of a perspective on the historical aspects of SharePoint that are relevant to this conversation and whatnot, and supporting Troy. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Sean. And we're certainly going to talk about modernizing SharePoint because a lot of organizations that we're talking to are really at a decision point on, whether they continue down the on-prem path with Microsoft or if they're going to go all in on the cloud and build their intranet certainly is what we're going to talk about today, but building out their more modern solutions on that framework. A little bit about Akumina. I only have a couple slides, so I won't get into too much here. We are an intranet platform, digital workplace platform. We serve 3 core audiences inside of our platform. That's internal comms, IT, and certainly the employees. We are built for Microsoft. We work on top of the Microsoft cloud framework. We are not built on top of any other platforms. We've got a lot of AI built into our software, and you'll see today that the software really can be tailor fit to any organization. And getting into a little bit about how we address the market, and I'm not going to cover all of these. Certainly, we could send the slides out after the meeting for anybody that wants them. But we provide a lot of capabilities on top of the Microsoft Cloud platform, again, to look at those 3 audiences, right? The comms team, there's a lot of tools in there. There's a lot of capabilities that users have access to when they're going to the site. And then due to the nature of our platform and how it just seamlessly integrates with the Microsoft system, there's a lot less burden on IT than bringing in a third party that's built on some other technology. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean to talk about the strengths of SharePoint Online for a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. So the strengths of SharePoint Online, if you're looking at SharePoint Online, you're probably familiar with them. But let's say you've been sequestered under a rock for the last bunch of years. And this whole cloud thing is new to you. SharePoint Online gives us the freedom to iterate and develop more readily and quickly. And the primary benefit we get from SharePoint Online is we get out of the server management business. And there's, we naturally have broader distribution, so accessibility goes up. We've got elasticity with the cloud, which is, very important, particularly for organizations that are, let's say rolling out an intranet. SharePoint Online gives us a portal scheduler, which can be used to stagger releases of SharePoint intranet. And those releases are, targeted at specific groups of users so that cloud can use its elasticity capabilities to then ramp up as load slowly increases. So the old idea of, a big bang doesn't make sense in the cloud. And so many patterns are different, but our concerns are largely absolved. Anything from, making sure your servers are patched to the latest version. You've got the latest product updates or roll-up packages for SharePoint. All of that a SharePoint admin used to take all the time in the world to do isn't really required anymore. Microsoft will continue to iterate and update. And largely, we just become users in a way of the online services. So many of the technical details kind of fall out of the mix and become non-issues in the cloud. When we start talking about SharePoint limits, and that's where, we were naturally interested. If we're looking at the cloud primarily from a cost, perspective, or any of the benefits we were just talking about, we do have to be aware that we've got some limits with SharePoint Online as well. Custom code, and this is these limitations might be reasons you're currently on-prem. Custom code, as in full trust solutions, aren't going to work out in SharePoint Online. Now, if you've got an arrangement with another cloud vendor or have a private cloud, your customization rules may differ, but Microsoft doesn't allow full trust code, and sandbox solutions have been deprecated and retired for quite some time. So those solutions aren't going to run as is in the cloud. We also have, deprecation, and many of us look at deprecation as kind of like a soft notification that, a feature is going to be turned off, but we continue to use it until it's not there anymore. Well, in the cloud, when things are deprecated and disabled, they're gone, essentially. We've also got some limitations because, again, all of these limitations, or the majority of them, are based on the multi-tenancy and the multi-tenant nature of SharePoint Online. Because when you're in your tenant as a company, another company is probably in the tenant next to you, and you may be in the same hardware with hundreds or even thousands of your closest friends. So many of the services for SharePoint are oriented towards control of the environment. And so things like workflows and technologies that interface with SharePoint aren't going to work the same and may even be different. We have to account for that. Things like search, since search is a service that will crawl everything in the tenant, it's going to crawl everybody's sites, including yours. And again, we need to be aware that we've got other people on this hardware. And that is going to present some limitations. We have to use Microsoft's managed search properties. We can't create our own, for example. And we also have limited control over the infrastructure. Many of the performance tuning activities we would do on-prem are now different because we don't have access to the servers. We don't have access to the underlying logs, systems, and things like that as we normally would. So these limits are mostly due to just changes in the way that the service is used versus how it might be used on-prem, as an example. So moving on, Troy, you want to jump in and say anything?
Yeah, pardon me. Yeah, I would really dive in on the things on the last slide, certainly, where we're talking about strengths of SharePoint Online, and I'll talk more deeply about this when I get into the how Akumina helps part of the presentation. We inherit all those strengths that SharePoint Online brings because we're built so tightly on top of the Microsoft Cloud infrastructure. So, things like permissions, things like um, DLP, those types of things we inherit. Where we see the area for opportunity for us and our customers is in addressing these things. And I'll get into talking about them, things like UI, UX constraints, certainly something that a lot of organizations struggle with when when they're choosing a platform. They want to be able to have control over the branding. They want to be able to have control over um, their kind of mission statements and how they present themselves to their employees. And sometimes SharePoint won't allow them to do that natively. And so you need another solution that works with SharePoint. And then integrations, certainly we've addressed those types of things, which you'll see a little bit of today when I talk about how clients are using our software. That's about all I would add, Sean.
Okay. So I'll go on to the next slide, migration considerations. So naturally going to the cloud, you're going to be involved with a migration, assuming you've got data in SharePoint sites that you want to continue to use and reference and be able to make use of. So, when it comes to the cloud, you are probably talking about a migration. And Microsoft, you've got the SharePoint migration tool that I know Microsoft has released. There are plenty of third-party tools out there. The word ShareGate just rolls off the lips of. We were actually having this conversation at a conference I was just at in Atlanta. Everybody talks about ShareGate almost like it is a default tool because they've been so approachable. So that, ShareGate is a great example of a partner who helps folks get to the cloud. This has been done for many organizations, but it does involve some planning. I've been part of projects that migrations have been almost like a bulleted line item. They were afterthoughts, and migrations are big deals because you've got not only your content, but you've got to worry about your code. The good news is, if we're talking about code and stuff that only runs on-prem, there are cloud patterns and approaches for traditional SharePoint problems and development tasks. Richard Dzurega with Microsoft Consulting Services wrote a blog post a while back talking about an on-prem pattern and the equivalent cloud pattern. And that's like the golden crib sheet if you're trying to go to the cloud and move your migrations up there. So you're going to be re-architecting code to meet cloud patterns. Workflows are probably going to be different because workflows in the cloud nowadays are provided by the Power Platform as far as SharePoint is concerned, unless you have another third-party tool or a platform that provides workflow capabilities. And as Troy said, you've still got SharePoint underneath this whole intranet that's happening. We use SharePoint at Akumina much like SharePoint Embedded is currently positioned. SharePoint Embedded treats SharePoint as a set of file stores, which essentially lists and libraries. And you bring your own interface and access to that API. Well, those are great. And that approach has scaled very well for Microsoft. We discovered much the same thing when we were building our headless product. And that's how we are using SharePoint. We're just not going through SharePoint Embedded. We're using Azure Blob Storage for CDNs and a variety of other things. So we're using much of the stack that Microsoft is now also using in the cloud. So a migration to a platform like Akumina could actually help you along the way in terms of getting things up there and in a form that you can continue to manage. I'll go to the next slide, Troy, customization, migration reality. Just to spend a few more words about this. When we're doing on-prem development and customizations, we've had, certain patterns. And I'll be honest, I've been working with SharePoint almost exclusively for 21 plus years now. SharePoint was never on the cutting edge of web technologies. In fact, it was embarrassing how far behind we were. And so going to the cloud not only is a change in platform, but for developers, it's going to be a change in how they do customizations. They may need to tool up. Around the 2013 days when the cloud app model came out for SharePoint, one of the most popular talks I gave was teaching. It was the equivalent of teaching old developers new tricks. You did this in SharePoint in the old days, back when you were writing server code. You now need to do it this way with either JavaScript or API calls or whatever, but it introduced those challenges. And so if you have been putting off dealing with your customizations, you need to focus on them and get educated on what your options are, particularly as far as SharePoint goes. And these are, the items on this slide, many of them are building blocks and solutions now. Client-side frameworks like there's everything from React. I know Microsoft has adopted React, and that's a popular one. The SharePoint framework, which leverages React, hosted services. We've got Azure functions now. We've got a wealth of new opportunities that can do what many of these server-side full trust solutions did. They just need to be redesigned, and the capabilities that rely on those features redesigned to use them. And so, workflows are another one. Power Platform is the stated declarative workflow replacement by Microsoft, but, workflow is a need that's universal. So, it's nice if you can find a platform that has some of these capabilities to thus reduce the load on developers who are going to be retooling, redoing everything. And then not only that, but changing the environment that they're trying to target. That's a lot of stuff to take in. And so that's about what I'd add here. Do you have anything, Troy?
I just kind of doubled down on the learning new tricks thing that Sean mentioned, and I'll get into this more with the Kuna side of things. Is the way that we're building, I believe, is much more accessible because we're using, things like JavaScript frameworks. We're using, known quantities like handlebars, Mustache, React, Bootstrap, all of those more modern frameworks. But JavaScript's been around for a long time. You've got a lot of people that know JavaScript and HTML out there, which are really the two core technologies that people need to know that to work with the software. That's a much lower barrier to entry than SPFX expertise, just simply for the fact that those frameworks have been around for a lot longer than SPFX. So naturally, you're going to have more people in a development team that would know those technologies. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the things about Akumina, which we'll do next. So I'm gonna, pardon me, I'm gonna take over the presentation at this point, but Sean, certainly I may call on you to elaborate.
Yeah, and I'll throw color commentary in where I think.
Perfect. So, as I mentioned when we were on some of the SharePoint slides, we're not a replacement for SharePoint. As a matter of fact, we're using a lot of the SharePoint capabilities, and built on top of those is an extension framework from functionality to design to workflow. Those types of things are built on top of that M365 and SharePoint ecosystem. So when we work with organizations, we're not asking them to bring in new expertise. If they've got M365 up and running, they're likely using SharePoint for some things already. And it's a very simple exercise to install Akumina, point it at that SharePoint instance, and set up a couple of sites for your intranet. And those are pretty basic SharePoint technologies, but we leverage that to then store content, build out taxonomies, permissions, and a whole host of other things. We've got a framework for customization. I talked about that a little bit. The customization or the way that we do it won't break your SPO supportability. Everything will run the same that it does today. You might be using different services that we plug into an M365, but you're not going to break your SPO support or anything in the Microsoft Cloud by using the Akumina framework. We provide a unified front end. So basically, think of it as a digital front door where you can have not just content like news articles, blogs, events. You can also have service level or system level content come in. So think Teams, think Outlook, think Word, and other document systems within inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. We connect to those seamlessly. We've also built out a framework for non-Microsoft integration. So think service platforms, whether you're talking about a Workday or a ServiceNow or something like that. We can integrate with those things. And then from a development model, I talked a little bit about this already. We are using, again, very industry standard development models. And it's easy for a development team to stand our stuff up. It's easy for them to learn it. It's easy for them to implement and extend our software based on the way that we've built things out. Sean, anything you want to add to this slide?
Not particularly. I mean, well, I will say this, that, we don't talk about our intranet platform. We talk about it as a digital workplace platform. So whether you're trying to build what I will call a classic intranet, which is a top-down, heavily curated content pyramid with CorpCom and certain authors at the top and everybody else down here at the bottom in terms of their sites, content tends to flow down. That's more the traditional intranet approach. But Akumina supports that equally as well as, a modern digital workplace intranet where you may have active working on documents, active meetings, and all sorts of other content that really just doesn't get published and read, but is more of a workspace. The platform supports both of those as well.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
I've talked about this topic a little bit, and Sean certainly touched on it as well. But again, the way that we're built, we're fully leveraging Microsoft's cloud. So it's not just about SharePoint. And again, Sean mentioned things like lists and libraries inside of SharePoint. Again, there's other things like metadata and taxonomy, permissions, a whole host of things in SharePoint that we're built on top of. But we're also highly leveraging things like Microsoft and Azure for things like hosting, different services, say translation or AI services, and certainly authentication. Whether you're using Entra, the Microsoft standard, or you're using another provider that works with Microsoft, we live under that umbrella. So we're not introducing, yet another login process to get to the intranet or get to that digital workplace. We're able to integrate very tightly, or we do integrate very tightly with the Microsoft Graph API. And that's very useful for being able to build representations of information coming from outside Microsoft as well as inside, right? So, things like other Microsoft services, you can get at those via the graph. But you can also use those graph connectors to call into other systems. You can use them to enrich search. And we're doing a lot of those things with inside of the platform. And then, going into search, the ability to utilize those graph connectors in search is a strong point of the way that we've implemented our solution. We leverage application insights with inside of the Microsoft framework. And so that allows for not just performance, but also usage analytics. What content's being viewed, what pages are popular, what users are in the system frequently or infrequently. So those types of things can be surfaced within our dashboards inside of our management console. And then, the last thing I'll talk about a little bit is, and it's really a hot topic, is utilizing the Microsoft, what's called semantic kernel, inside of their framework to build on top of. That's the same layer that Microsoft builds Copilot on top of. So really, there's that cross kind of knowledge sharing. We do not provide the LLM, the large language model that our customers leverage. They can leverage OpenAI, Azure, OpenAI, and others. Really anything that'll work with that kernel, which there's quite a few. And that gives them choice, certainly. So the ability to choose the model that works best for them, that they're most comfortable with. But it also gives them full oversight over security and content access. So the customers of ours determine what AI is aware of. And we even provide some capabilities inside of our editing environment for authors to be able to choose to make that content available or not. That could also be part of a workflow, maybe needing to be approved by somebody if they flag it as being enabled for AI, so making AI aware of it. So those types of things certainly tie into our platform. We also provide a lot of context within inside of our system, leveraging AI. So things like using search to generate AI-based summaries for content that search found. So not like Google and just doing a broad search and saying, find me this content, and it's going to summarize everything in the web, but really search locating content and then AI being able to help the end user discover knowledge within inside of that content using a conversational interface. We also provide that with inside our authoring interfaces. So standard tools like authoring assistance, content generation, certainly, but also the ability to handshake between content and AI, allowing an author to embed prompts in their content that will then drive employees to additional and supporting material that they can then navigate using AI. And so it's a very kind of strong coupling of the AI framework, but we're also building in a lot of flexibility because 6 months from now, a year from now, AI is going to introduce new capabilities and new ways of doing things. And the way that we've built our platform with AI at the core will allow us to pivot or add additional functionality as AI just gets richer and more mature. So how do we enhance SharePoint online? So I've talked a bit about that, as Sean was presenting as well as in the last slides, but kind of to look at a quick recap, we're providing true enterprise search across federated sources using AI, really coupled to those search results and those search outcomes. Fully branded. So, Sean mentioned the word headless during his part of the presentation. And really what that is a completely, from a design perspective, completely decoupled environment from SharePoint Online. And so it gives our customers the flexibility that they would have on, say, any public-facing website from a design and branding perspective. And we even have quick starts for that. We've got a whole intranet package that we've built on top of our platform that customers can deploy and brand because of the way we've implemented. We've got very, very deep targeting and personalization capabilities within the software. The ability for you to send out tailored communications, whether it's on the site or via things like email, Teams, or text. Those things are all built in and again, can all be targeted and personalized. Multilingual content management, on-the-fly translation, so automated translations built in. You can build rules around it so that as content's created in one language, additional language are required. It can be routed through workflow within our system if you want somebody that knows that end language intimately to be able to go in and just fact check it. Those types of things exist. And again, we can integrate with line of business systems that our customers use alongside of M365, right? Organizations are not using M365 for everything they manage. You know, they've got ERPs, they've got CRMs, they've got service platforms that they, are leveraging as well. And sometimes they want to be able to surface content, information, action from those systems. And then, of course, everything that we build from a design perspective is mobile first, so fully responsive, both from that solution that we can implement with our customers, as well as just the core components, what we call widgets. And then we've got a native app option that people can leverage if they want that additional capability. Maybe they want to lock it down using a mobile management tool, or maybe they want to, take advantage of things like location awareness, cameras, things like that on the mobile platforms, if they've got those types of use cases. So I'm going to go into a little bit about what the results can be, because again, we're a flexible platform. What I'm going to show you are examples of how you might implement our software, again, leveraging not just SharePoint, but Microsoft 365 as part of the solution. What I'll do is I'll just pause very quickly before doing this. Chris, are there any questions that have come up in chat that we might want to address at this point, or should I keep going on?
Just a comment on any specificity around some of the other like ServiceNow or Workday, some of the other solutions that we connect with and how we connect. So request for a little detail on that.
Yeah, certainly. I can show an example of that and kind of our methodology, and a lot of it is on the planning and architecture side, rather than the technology side, especially with graph-enabled systems. But I'll show an example of that.
Sounds
So
good.
go ahead and pull up something I'd like to show. So I'm going to pause the presentation here and just pull up this site. And I'm going to show you some examples as well today of how our customers are leveraging the platform. So again, this is a site that is built. It's hosted in Azure, but it's built leveraging all of those underlying Microsoft tools. Everything from, say, my profile. A lot of that data is coming from Entra ID and coming from Microsoft sources. To things like showing me what's going on in my world, right? So I've got tasks from Planner. I've got an upcoming meeting on Thursday. Hey, you've got some late tasks. I'm getting an email about that. Here's a document I've recently been working with and possibly collaborating with people on. So all of those things are calls into that Microsoft backend, right? Calls in through Graph and allowing us to bring that content forward. From a news perspective, we've got a very highly tailored and personalized approach to news. So again, that more advanced kind of content delivery that we build in that goes beyond what SharePoint Online delivers natively, that's all built in. So I can come in and make choices. Those choices are going to change the way that content is presented to me. And again, you can do targeting as well. I'll talk a little bit about that when I go back up to the top of the page here. From an integration perspective, you're seeing examples of it here beyond Microsoft, right? So maybe I've got an LMS platform and I want to show the end user some training that they've been assigned. Maybe we're using ServiceNow for ticketing and knowledge base articles. I want to be able to show the status of those tickets and even give people the ability to click in, launch ServiceNow right in that environment, right into that ticket, so they can pick up and do whatever they need to do. Or maybe they need to mark it as completed because the work has been done, or maybe they need to escalate something. And they're going to do that in ServiceNow, but they're getting those alerts here. We don't see this very often, but we do like to bring it up because some use cases maybe it's an approval or something like that, are maybe easily done in the intranet interface. So like requesting time off could be one of those where I'm inputting the data in this web form, but it's going to go to a backend system like a Workday or something like that. So we don't see this, and that gets into the methodology. We don't see this heavily being used, that kind of push into other systems for a number of reasons. They're more complicated to build, but they're very also complicated to maintain because let's say there's a new process as part of that vacation time request that has been built into Workday. Well, that integration is going to have to be extended as well. So now you've got some maintenance that you need to be able to do. Whereas service calls like this, where it's surfacing data, those APIs don't change over time very often. And they often give you very quick workarounds if they do. And so those integrations are very much more easy to maintain. ServiceNow is an example of using the Graph API for the connectivity. Workday provides some of that as well. But if systems provide things like APIs um, and other ways of getting data out of them, we can surface it like this and provide for that deep linking. From a communications perspective, you're seeing I actually have an alert up here. That's actually an alert that can be targeted and personalized. And so maybe the open enrollment is only for people in the US. So because I'm in the US, I'm going to see that message where, somebody that's sitting in an office in the UK or in another region or say Canada, they might not see those things or that type of announcement on top of the way that we can present um, data, there's also the management side of things. And I'll get into that in a moment. Before I do so, I do want to bring up a couple of different examples here. So this is an example of a client that took that site that you saw. That is our out-of-the-box site. We use that to show off the software. And they were able to leverage all of our components, that site template, all of the department structures that we can build under it, and tweak it to meet their needs, right? So it doesn't look anything like our demo site. It's using the same components and widgets, but it's using them in a very different way to be able to provide information to employees in a very targeted way. And if I go into just one more quick example here, I'll open this one up. Same kind of work stream here. This customer used the Hive site, it's what we call our out-of-the-box foundational site, and they went in. For example, they changed news to be more of a carousel at the top here, then supported by other featured news and upcoming events. They're also having conversations on the home page. They're doing things like recognitions, which are built-in capabilities in the software. So all of these things can be implemented with inside of our solution and then redesigned, both from a functionality like turning the news panels into a carousel, uh, or you can go and leverage custom development to build out any type, or I should say custom design, any type of interface that you might want. So those are some of the capabilities, or I should say results on the back end of, or the front end of things. From a back end perspective, we provide an environment for authors and administrators to come in and manage whatever they need to inside of a very friendly environment. So from a content perspective, maybe I need to add or edit a news article. I can have a template like this that allows me to do that, that is much more friendly for communications professionals. It's structured like a web content management system because that's really our background, and we understand that's one of the more underserved needs inside of SharePoint Online in terms of being able to target communications the way that you might want. I can go in and select different tags and departments I want to relate content to. I can go in and choose different personas that I might want to target content at. I can tune search through different search configurations or enable things like engagement with content. And all of that can be done in an easy interface. We've got hundreds of different components. We've got analytics built in, things like the broadcast center or workflows to allow you to more easily communicate with employees and send content into workflows. So there's a lot of different tools and capabilities that we bring to the table on both sides of the equation. The ability to have whatever front end you want, whatever use cases make sense to you, along with the ability to manage that content in a more user-friendly manner for communications professionals and even department level communicators where they need to go in and maybe update HR information or IT bulletins or something like that. It can really be used across the organization to be able to communicate more effectively. So those are the things that I wanted to show live. If anybody is looking to see more, we certainly can set up a more full-fledged demonstration. But just to close out the session, just a few key points. SharePoint Online is the future of SharePoint. On-prem is not going away, but their innovation is definitely in their clouds, right? They're not really innovating in the on-prem world. Migration requires careful consideration and planning, especially when you get into customizations. Akumina and SharePoint Online together can really deliver the best of what customers are looking for. Our best customers are looking for that highly extendable framework, both from a design and functionality standpoint, but they also are looking for the performance, scalability, and security that they get by having solutions sitting in SharePoint Online and Azure and Microsoft 365 at large. The extension of capabilities, I already talked about quite a bit, but on a UX side, we've looked at some examples. From an ROI perspective, you're not managing other types of systems, right? You're not managing anything from an infrastructure perspective that you're not already managing today. You're not burdening IT with those maintenance items, but also with even things that should be simple, like content and page generation can be more difficult in SharePoint, and IT teams are often called on to do those types of things. And it's really a future-proof solution utilizing SharePoint Online and Akumina together, because you're able to take advantage of all the innovations in Microsoft's cloud while leveraging our capabilities on top of that. So those are the things that we wanted to share today. Certainly open to questions, comments, any feedback that you folks might have.
Yeah, and while you folks are figuring out what to do next, I'll just add the reminder. Satya Nadella said a number of years ago, and he announced Microsoft is going cloud first. And that very much says what you need to know about on-prem. I mean, on-prem will be around, but Microsoft is innovating for the cloud first and then backporting that to on-prem products. So if you've been on-prem to stay the latest and greatest, you're now playing catch up all the time. So yet more reason and motivation to get to the cloud.
Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah, thanks, Sean. The only other question was around sharing this. I mentioned up front, but I'll say again that we did record the session. We will share the recording on our website. That's probably more for the people who emailed beforehand who said they were on vacation or something this week, as opposed to for those of you who are here. Last chance for any questions if anybody wants to put their hands up. Other than that, we will send out a follow-up email with the recording. So if you want to share it with your colleagues, you can do that as well. We'll also post it on our website. Okay. Any last questions before we go on?
We appreciate you guys coming today.
Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And thank you, Sean and Troy, as well. And we hope everybody has a great rest of the summer. And we will see everybody, if not before, after Labor Day. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.